Welcome back, everybody. You know what time it is? It's time for another deep dive. And today we're going to a really interesting place, the intersection of Western theory and Eastern cinema.
Sounds fascinating.
It is. We're going to be exploring how the concepts of postmodernism, and I know we all know a little bit about postmodernism already, but we're going to be exploring how they might help us understand what some scholars are calling film industry aesthetics
Okay.
in Chinese cinema.
Wow. So that's using Western ideas to understand Eastern cinema.
Exactly.
Very cool.
And we've got some really interesting sources for this deep dive.
Okay.
A Chinese textbook titled Postmodernism and Cultural Theory, focusing on the book's preface, and a chapter called Culture Reappearance.
Interesting.
And then also 3 academic papers that are focusing specifically on this idea of film industry aesthetics.
Okay, so that's kind of a focused look then.
Exactly. And so we've got the theory side, and then we have people who are actually applying that theory to a specific national cinema.
I see.
So it'll be interesting to see what those scholars are saying.
Yeah, so what's the big question here then?
Well, I think the big question is, how can understanding postmodernism illuminate this concept of film industry aesthetics, particularly in the context of Chinese cinema?
All right, well, let's dive in.
Let's do it. Now, I know you're already pretty familiar with postmodernism. It's all about, challenging those grand narratives, questioning those traditional notions of authorship and originality.
Right.
But this textbook that we have actually emphasizes the individual's role
Okay.
in a postmodern world,
Interesting.
how we construct meaning and interpret art in our own unique ways.
Uh,
It kind of reminds me of the death of the author concept.
right, the idea that the author's intention isn't necessarily the only way to interpret a work of art.
Exactly. Once a work is out in the world, the audience kind of takes over.
Yeah, takes on a life of its own.
Exactly. And this connects to something really fascinating that's in the textbook in that culture reappearance chapter. It talks about how history and artistic movements don't necessarily progress in a straight line. They kind of cycle through phases.
Mm.
So what's old becomes new again, but with a twist.
Right, like everything old is new again.
Exactly. And you can actually see this reappearance playing out in Chinese cinema.
Really?
Older genres like historical dramas are making a comeback, but with a distinctly modern feel.
Interesting.
It makes you wonder if film industry aesthetics might be influencing how those reappearances are happening.
Okay, so we've got this framework of postmodernism where individual interpretation is key and the author's intent isn't everything. So building on that understanding, let's shift our focus to film.
Okay.
If we apply this concept to the world of cinema, it raises a question. If the director isn't the sole creative force behind a film, then what is?
Okay, I see where you're going with this. You're setting the stage for film industry aesthetics, right?
Precisely. This concept encourages us to look beyond the director as the sole auteur and consider the influence of the film industry itself.
So it's not just about the artistic vision of the director, but also about things like production processes, market demands, and audience expectations.
Exactly. All of these factors contribute to what we ultimately see on screen.
Right.
These papers analyze Chinese cinema through this very lens, looking at how industrial production and commercial forces shape the films being made.
Which makes a lot of sense considering how much Chinese cinema has grown as a global industry. It's become a powerhouse.
Indeed. So these papers dive into how things like budgets, marketing strategies, and even target demographics can influence the types of stories being told, the aesthetics being employed, and even the underlying messages being conveyed.
This is where I think the connection to postmodernism starts to become really clear. Both postmodernism and film industry aesthetics challenge those traditional notions of authorship and originality, recognizing that art is often the product of multiple influences, not just a single artistic vision.
That's a key point, but it also raises a crucial question. Does film industry aesthetics ultimately reinforce or subvert dominant power structures?
That's a big one. And to answer it, we need to look at some specifics from the papers. For instance, one argues that by focusing on genres that are particularly popular with the Chinese diaspora film industry aesthetics actually helps promote certain cultural narratives globally.
Which raises the question of whose narratives are being promoted and whose are being marginalized.
Right. It makes you think about how even seemingly commercial decisions can have broader cultural and even political implications.
And it highlights the importance of looking beyond the surface. Film industry aesthetics isn't just about budgets and marketing. It's about understanding the complex interplay of art, commerce, and power.
I'm really curious to hear more about the specific arguments of the papers. Can you walk us through some of the key points they raise?
Absolutely. Absolutely. One paper dives into the rise of these big budget blockbusters in China,
Okay.
and it argues that film industry aesthetics has led to this prioritization of spectacle over substance. So we're talking elaborate special effects, A-list celebrities, action-packed plots, all those things that are designed to draw in massive box office crowds.
Yeah, it makes sense if audiences are responding to those big budget spectacles, then it's only natural that production companies are going to want to deliver what people want to see. But does that mean that artistic integrity always takes a backseat to commercial success?
That's where it gets interesting. Another paper actually kind of pushes back on that idea,
Okay.
arguing that film industry aesthetics isn't just about appealing to the lowest common denominator.
Interesting.
It also highlights the role of genre conventions and audience expectations in shaping Chinese cinema.
So it's not just about blindly chasing box office numbers, but about understanding what resonates with audiences on a deeper level. Are
Exactly.
they looking at any specific genres in these papers?
They do. One focuses on the resurgence of historical dramas in Chinese cinema,
Okay.
and it argues that these films often utilize these familiar tropes and narratives that appeal to a sense of cultural identity and national pride.
So there's this fascinating layer of cultural and potentially political subtext woven into these seemingly commercial genre films.
Right.
It makes you wonder if film industry aesthetics can almost be used as a tool to shape perceptions of China, both domestically and internationally.
It's certainly a possibility, and it speaks to the power of film as a medium for cultural influence.
Yeah.
But the papers don't necessarily present this as a clear-cut issue of like propaganda or manipulation.
Okay.
Instead, they encourage us to be aware of the complexities at play, you know, recognizing that commercial decisions can have unintended cultural and political consequences.
Yeah, it's a reminder that the films that we watch are shaped by a multitude of forces, and understanding those forces can enhance our appreciation for the art form.
Exactly. Film industry aesthetics provides a framework for understanding those forces and how they influence filmmaking decisions.
So looking back at those genre conventions, do the papers suggest that film industry aesthetics ultimately reinforces or subverts power structures?
That's a complex question, and the papers offer some compelling insights. Remember our discussion about the cyclical nature of history?
Uh-huh.
Well, one paper argues that by revisiting these historical narratives through a contemporary lens, filmmakers can both appeal to a sense of cultural continuity and challenge those traditional interpretations of the past.
So those genre conventions can be used in a way that simultaneously upholds and subverts existing power structures. It's a delicate balance.
Indeed, and that's where the lens of postmodernism becomes even more valuable. It helps us to appreciate the layers of meaning that are embedded within these films, recognizing that they can operate on multiple levels simultaneously.
It encourages us to engage with these films not just as entertainment, but as cultural artifacts that reflect the complexities of the society that produced them.
Absolutely. And that level of engagement, that willingness to look beyond the surface, is ultimately what makes art so rewarding.
I agree.
It allows us to connect with ideas, perspectives, and experiences that we might otherwise miss.
So what does this all mean for someone who is passionate about Chinese cinema? How can they apply these ideas to their own viewing experience?
Well, for one, it encourages a more critical and nuanced understanding of the films being produced. Recognizing the role of film industry aesthetics allows viewers to appreciate the craft and ingenuity of filmmakers working within a particular system.
Right.
It also encourages them to look for those moments where filmmakers manage to push boundaries, subvert expectations, offer fresh perspectives, even within the constraints of the industry.
I love that finding those sparks of artistic individuality within a system that is often driven by commercial considerations. It makes the viewing experience feel more active, more engaged.
Exactly. And it also opens up this fascinating avenue for dialogue and debate. Understanding film industry aesthetics allows for more informed discussions about the direction of Chinese cinema, the impact of market forces on artistic choices, and the potential for these films to shape cultural perceptions.
It's no longer just about enjoying a movie for its entertainment value, but about understanding the bigger picture, the cultural, historical, and even political context in which it was created.
Precisely. And it's those layers of context that ultimately enrich our appreciation for any form of art, prompting us to ask deeper questions, to challenge our assumptions, and to engage in meaningful conversations about the world around us.
Okay, so we've explored how this concept plays out in Chinese cinema. But you mentioned earlier that this idea of film industry aesthetics might also apply to other creative fields, right?
It's a thought-provoking question, isn't it? We've
Mm.
seen how industrial and commercial forces shape filmmaking in China,
Yeah.
but are we seeing similar trends in literature, music, visual art, even in the world of podcasts?
That's interesting. If we consider things like the dominance of certain genres in popular music or the rise of commercially driven art markets, could those be seen as manifestations of industry aesthetics in their respective fields?
Yeah, it really makes you think about all the forces at play behind all forms of creative expression. Are we seeing a trend towards industry aesthetics as a dominant force across the board?
It's a compelling question and one worth exploring further. We've focused on Chinese cinema in this deep dive, but as you said, these concepts can be applied to other mediums as well. Think about the world of publishing, for example, bestseller lists, marketing campaigns, even the way books are categorized into genres. All of these factors contribute to what we might call publishing industry aesthetics.
So even something as seemingly individualistic as writing a novel is influenced by these larger industry forces.
Absolutely. And the same could be said for music, visual art, even video games. The commercial aspects of these industries inevitably shape the creative output in subtle but significant ways.
It's like we're peeling back the layers of the creative process and
Hmm.
seeing the machinery at work. Yeah. Exactly. And while some might view this as a negative thing, a stifling of true artistic expression, I think it's more nuanced than that. Understanding these forces doesn't diminish the power of art. It simply allows us to engage with it on a deeper level.
It's like we're gaining this new lens through which to view the world of art and culture. A lens that helps us to see not just the beauty and the creativity, but also the forces that shape and influence those creations.
Exactly. And this understanding can be incredibly empowering. By recognizing the role of industry aesthetics, we become more informed and discerning consumers of art and culture. We can appreciate the creativity and skill of the artists while also being aware of the commercial considerations that may have influenced their work.
It's like we're leveling up our critical thinking skills and becoming more conscious consumers of creative content.
Precisely.
Does understanding industry aesthetics change how we experience art?
It can certainly enhance our appreciation. Knowing the context in which a work was created, the trends, the market forces, the audience expectations can give us a richer understanding of the creative choices made by the artists.
So it's not about dismissing commercially successful works as like selling out, but rather about recognizing the complexities at play.
Precisely. It's about appreciating the interplay between art and commerce and understanding how those forces can sometimes work in harmony and sometimes create tension.
Well, I think we've given our listeners a lot to ponder today. Any final thoughts before we wrap up our deep dive into postmodernism and film industry aesthetics?
Just this: keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep pushing the boundaries of your own understanding. The world of art and culture is vast and ever-evolving, and there's always something new to discover.
Beautifully said. And remember, dear listeners, knowledge is power. The more you understand about the forces shaping the world around you, the more empowered you become to navigate that world with confidence and creativity.
Until next time, happy viewing.
And happy creating.